welcome to Hot Roster today. I'm Gary and Thorne. That is Cam Stewart. And Cam, it is Friday, which means we are taking some last looks at Hot Roster today this week as we lead up to Week 9 of the NFL season. But Week 9 is already underway, technically speaking, because we actually had a pretty good Thursday night football game for once.
I got to be honest with you, Gary, and things were pretty crazy. I'm covering the Breeders' Cup, but I still had a couple guys in my game. And when I checked my fantasy team, Pooch Patrol, and I see Mike Evans with 22 fantasy points, I'm pretty happy. I was actually happy they took the touchdown away from Brate. And then Mike Evans got the touchdown. I'll tell you something, too. We talk about OBJ. The acrobatics of Mike Evans is very underrated.
Well, let's talk about Mike Evans, because coming into this season, Mike Evans was a guy who in most fantasy circles had underwhelmed last season, mostly due to touchdown expectancy. He was a guy, he and only Jarvis Landry, not catching 5 touchdowns inside the top 25 of receivers who had been in the top 25 in targets last season. So you knew the touchdowns were going to come with a guy like Mike Evans, who is basically a tree standing in that end zone. Gets 2 touchdowns last night, 150 yards with Jameis Winston. Julio Jones, who pretty much renowned top 3 wide receiver regardless of format coming into 2016. He also puts up a big game, gets in the end zone himself. So Cam, as crazy as this question might sound last season, or as crazy as it would sound after Julio put up a 300-yard game earlier this season, right now we have the number 1 and number 1 wide receivers in terms of fantasy points in a PPR this season. Both these guys at 178 fantasy points in points per opportunity in a PPR. 0.59 for Julio, that's first. 0.58 for Evans, that's second.
Tight.
It seems crazy because Julio has always been renowned as one of the top wideouts in fantasy football. But if you had to pick one of these guys the rest of the season, is there a case for Mike Evans?
Actually, there is a case for Mike Evans. He has more touchdowns, Gary. And another thing with Tampa Bay and Jameis Winston, you talked about it, man. He's basically a redwood in the end zone, but a redwood that has also blazing speed and great hands. And the difference is the Atlanta Falcons, despite Tevin Coleman, Freeman, they have backs who come in and can get yards. The Tampa Bay running game is an absolute joke. So Jameis Winston has to throw to guys all the time. And I'll tell you, guys like Humphreys, he's not big enough. Evans and Brate are the targets, and obviously Evans is the best athlete, so he's going to get so many looks and so many targets in the end zone. Yes, we can make a team a case for Mike Evans. We can.
And I think, and
Julio's been inconsistent this year, despite the
been
crazy numbers. He's been inconsistent.
And I own Julio Jones in a lot of leagues, and believe me, I'm happy to be sitting up 50-0 with a Julio Jones, Matt Ryan stack in one of my leagues with some Thursday night mo, as we like to call it. But I actually think Evans is the guy you want to own the rest of the season, because not only, like Cam was talking about, the touchdown expectancy for these two guys, even though Atlanta lives in the red zone, one of the best teams at red zone trips per game so far this season, only 6.7% of the team targets in the red zone go to Julio Jones. Compare that to Mike Evans at 30% so far this season. I know Atlanta's there more, but if that big a split is going to take place, I think Evans is the guy you want. And also, Cam, you look at the championship, the playoff schedule, as you have to do past Week 9 of the fantasy season. Mike Evans and the Tampa Bay Bucks get New Orleans twice in the fantasy playoffs, Week 14 and championship week, Week 16. In comparison, Atlanta does get New Orleans one more time this season. It's Week 17, which, Cam, as we know, means nothing.
No, Gary, you said it, though. Like, the thing is, when you're looking at the Atlanta Falcons in their situation, right, Freeman, Coleman, even a guy like Sanu, who's a big guy. You could go to so many different guys, whereas in Tampa Bay, who do you go to? You go to Mike Evans. He is the most reliable guy you have. So I think you just keep on feeding the man.
And without Vincent Jackson, who's on the IR, it's been basically cut and dry the entirety of his career. If Mike Evans is playing without Vincent Jackson, all the targets going to Mike Evans. Okay, let's talk about two guys who might not even play this weekend, Cam, and we have to debate whether or not you trust either one of Carlos Hyde or LaShawn McCoy. So basically, to set the scene for you right now, Cam, LaShawn McCoy did practice on Friday for the Buffalo Bills. He came out before practice and even said, "I feel good." Now, it's a Monday night game, which adds a new wrinkle, because if he all of a sudden, Monday afternoon, says he's not playing, doesn't give you a whole lot of time or options to fill in a replacement for LaShawn McCoy. Now, Carlos Hyde, it's confirmed he has a sprained AC joint. Generally, that's a multi-week injury. He missed Week 7, was on bye Week 8. It seemed set in stone back in Week 7 that he was only going to miss that one game. Now, it doesn't necessarily look good. He's been wearing a non-contact jersey all week long. Chip Kelly won't confirm or deny whether or not this guy is going to play. So that seems bad. But we just talked about the Saints being a fantastic matchup for Mike Evans in the future. They are the future, the direct future of the San Francisco 49ers. Hemorrhage points to running backs this season, the most fantasy points allowed to running backs in a PPR set. So Hyde, you obviously want to play him. McCoy has that tough matchup against Seattle. Do you trust either one of these guys at this point?
Actually, you know what? It is a very tough matchup against Seattle, Gary, but I'm looking at it. You know, he had 58 yards and a touchdown against Baltimore, one of his worst games, 59 against the Jets, which was McCoy's worst game, and then 70 against the Patriots. So when you're really breaking it down, other than that, just monster numbers. So when a guy's averaging close to 86 yards a game, even though it is Seattle, we know he's going to get volume carries, so a good option. But you said it. If Carlos Hyde is healthy against the Saints, these guys are Swiss cheese. He can do whatever he wants. And the other problem with the Niners is the other options they have, they really suck.
Yeah.
Like, they suck.
I will say, because they suck, I mean, in some leagues, in some formats where you have the owners who are really on the ball, DeJuan Harris might not be available anymore, but he's still not a guy who's heavily owned, whether you're playing CBS, Yahoo, ESPN. So if you're in a 10-man league, I guarantee you DeJuan Harris is not owned. If you're a Carlos Hyde owner, just pick him up. I mean, if Carlos Hyde plays, obviously you play Carlos Hyde. If he doesn't, you just slot DeJuan Harris in there. The matchup I've said this before, it's like playing Tecmo Super Bowl. It's not either one of these guys. It's RB San Francisco 49ers. Just slot that person in against the Saints.
Like Bo Jackson driving a dump truck through everybody here.
No one's Bo Jackson. Maybe a little Christian Okoye.
Yes. Oh, the Nigerian nightmare, Gary.
Exactly.
Strong.
Let's go talk some Browns, which we've covered a little bit this week, maybe more than anyone would expect.
I got to be honest with you, we were talking too much about the Browns, but there is news.
But there's always news with the Browns because their quarterback situation is always in flux. But Hugh Jackson is finally named a starter for their Week 9 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, and it will be, as many beat writers predicted, Cody Kessler, who is out of the concussion protocol. Josh McCown, after playing last week, will now sit on the bench, even though these guys have been both practicing in full the last couple games. So, Cam, does this make a difference for the Browns? Would you rather see, if you're a Pryor owner, if you're a Coleman owner, would you rather have seen McCown as the starting quarterback?
Yes, I would. I think McCown is a better quarterback. I think McCown gives Cleveland a chance to win, but we're living in the fantasy world. These guys are pretty close. As for Coleman, he's had 2 games. McCown, he lit it up with them in one of the games, too. And 178 total receiving yards in a couple games, that's good. I'm going to tell you, though, Pryor's been great all season long. We have to really give him credit, too. When he came out, Ohio State, played with the Raiders, I wasn't even sure if this guy was going to be in the league. And all of a sudden, you go from quarterback to receiver and still lighting it up all the time. Kudos to you, Terrell Pryor, for being a true professional. And I got to be honest with you, the move that Kessler's starting, I think it actually kind of benefits him because Coleman, in a very small sample size, Gary, had a pretty good relationship with McCown.
I think it's tough to say, and this is a situation.
Like, what do you do in this situation? I think you start these guys.
I think Terrell Pryor at this point is like a guy you just play. I mean, he's a fringe wide receiver 1, as we talked about last week. So regardless of who starts in this matchup, he's played with them both so far this season. Just put Terrell Pryor in your lineups. But again, the difference between Cody Kessler and Josh McCown is like picking the difference between Brussels sprouts and broccoli. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Actually, it does matter. Broccoli kills Brussels sprouts.
Well, Brussels sprouts is a bad
broccoli.
example because Brussels sprouts is absolutely terrible. But I'm just saying, neither of these guys is popcorn. Neither of these guys is chips.
You're
you know
right.
What I mean?
No peanut butter cups with those two.
This is not exactly a peachy matchup for either of these guys. But if you look at the advanced metrics, I know I had Jim Sonis of Numberfire on my show yesterday, and he was talking about how Cody Kessler, by some of these advanced metrics that Numberfire has, Kessler's actually been the better quarterback so far this season. He's got a much better completion percentage. He's not going to take the deep shots like McCown has. The ADOT is over 2 yards less in 5 games than McCown in 2 games so far this season. So if Coleman comes back and is running those deep routes like he was in that 2-game sample, that's a little worrisome, but I think he takes over that Andrew Hawkins role a little bit more. So
you said it, though.
I don't think it matters for either one of these guys.
The Cleveland Browns are basically the Swedish fish of candy. Like, you know what I mean? They're not chocolate. They're at the bottom of the barrel.
That is a definitive statement if I've ever heard one. Before we get out of the Big Four, Cam, we have to talk about the Green Bay Packer backfield one more time. And it seems like Ty Montgomery is going to start this week. So let's not necessarily talk about this week because obviously a peachy matchup against Indianapolis, 31st DVOA against running backs in the passing game. So Montgomery is set up to do big things in that contest. But James Starks won't play against the Colts, however, is back and practicing. And he will probably be a factor for Week 10. So what sort of wrench does James Starks throw in there?
He throws a wrench in, but I'm not really comfortable with him, Gary. And 1.8 yards a carry. He's been absolutely pathetic this year. And one thing we know about Ty Montgomery, not only being a PPR machine, he's getting total yards. We're talking about it, right? Over a couple hundred in the games he plays. So imagine you're in a PPR, you're loving this guy. You simply throw in a touchdown, one of those times at the goal line, and Montgomery is going to make fantasy owners go nuts. They're going to go wild. So I'll tell you one thing. Stark says he'll get some carries, but I'm going to tell you something. The Green Bay Packers as a football team have been better with Montgomery. They look different. Devontae Adams is now better, and Rodgers looks happier. Want to know why? Because he's not handing off the ball to a turkey that's going to get you 2 yards a carry. It's different. Montgomery does so many other things. I love the guy.
No, I have to agree with you. Right now, sometimes you have to look at these things from a statistical perspective, but then just Green Bay's been been so much better.
Correct.
So much better with Montgomery. So hopefully Mike McCarthy realizes that and just continues to roll out Montgomery. Okay, when we come back on Hot Roster Today, Corey Parson,
the exec.
fantasy exec, is going to stop by and break down another Hot Roster Today card as, again, we inch towards Week 9 of the fantasy season.